This year, the world gathered for the games that we see every 2 years, the Olympics. They've evolved to the Summer and Winter Games that we now know today, and most people are aware of the incredible origins of the Olympics in ancient Greece. Today, my goal is to enlighten you as to the worst Olympic events to ever occur, the 1904 Olympics. These games were held in St. Louis, and while the whole games could be our focus for today, we will be honing in on the Olympic marathon. Now, the predating games already had people in a state of unease concerning the viability of the Olympics. In 1896, the Olympic Games were revived successfully in Athens, Greece, with a complete roster of the games from ancient times. However, the next games in 1900 were hosted in Paris that consisted of races in the Seine River against the strong current and hurdles made from telephone poles, not to mention the excellent shadow that was cast from the World's Fair. Therefore, it was not really looking good for the Olympics revival. The Olympics were then chosen to move to Chicago for the 1904 Games. However, the World's Fair, once again, was meant to be held in St. Louis that very same year. And St. Louis was worried that the proximity of the Olympics in another city would drive away tourism that was expected to go to them. So, there's some scheming on St. Louis's part, which consisted of hosting their own track and field competition at the same time as the Olympics. They were eventually awarded the 1904 Olympics to keep them alive. So now the city of St. Louis would be hosting the World's Fair, the ACCU track and field competition, and the Olympics. Now these games proved to be an ill-conceived money grab that almost destroyed the revival of the games that we love today. Moreover, the competition wasn't anywhere close to the Olympic standard that we see now. The games had no serious attendance in the way of athletes. For comparison's sake, the 2020 Olympics recently saw 205 countries compete, with 11,091 athletes participating. The 1904 Games, being in the middle of rural America, had 12 countries competing with only 650 athletes. Fewer than 100 of those athletes were from outside the US, and half of those athletes were Canadian. Due to the low attendance, they allowed people to join any event at any time, even off of the street. The games themselves had little in the way of measuring athleticism as well. One game, for example, was the plunge dive for distance, where swimmers just saw who could dive the lowest without using their arms, which is a game you play with your friends at the pool. Now that we've covered the previous games and the horrible organization of the 1904 Games, we will also cover the marathon, arguably the worst Olympic event in history. The race itself was an utter disaster. The marathon course consisted of 7 hills, each of which were between 100 to 300 feet high. None of the main roads were closed off, so runners had to dodge trains and cars as they ran and avoid breathing in the inches of dust that was being kicked up by vehicles, as well avoid tripping on the rocks that were littered across the runway. The race was run in mid-afternoon August on a hot, humid day, and the Olympic marathon also consisted of a twist. The runners were not allowed to drink water until mile 6 and mile 12 from a small well. Many athletes collapsed within the first couple miles. A stray dog chased one athlete, Len Tao, for over a mile, and he still ended up coming in 9th place. Another athlete, Thomas Hicks, ran on the performance-enhancing drink egg whites and rat poison. And one runner, Frank Loers, hitched a ride in a car for 11 miles after dropping out of the race at mile 9. He initially was declared the winner after running the last 5 miles because his car ride broke down. He claimed to be joking about winning the race, but the crowd was not amused after waiting for nearly 3 hours for a winner to cross the finish line. The winning athlete ended up being Thomas Hicks, the one who ran on egg whites and rat poison. With 7 miles to go, his manager gave him another dose of the strychnine and egg white. It helped, but Hicks became demoralized when Frank Loers passed him in a car, waving as he went. Hicks begged his manager to let him stop, and his manager refused, giving him another dose of the strychnine. Poisoned and exhausted, frankly, Hicks collapsed through the finish line with a time of 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 53 seconds, the slowest Olympic marathon ever in history. Hicks almost died as a result of it. In the end, only 14 of the 32 runners even crossed the finish line. Unfortunately, these Olympic Games could not wait another 4 years to redeem themselves, and 2 years later, a do-over Games was held in Athens in 1906. However, the disastrous 1904 Games will not soon be forgotten. From the lack of athletes to the horrendous, even cruel marathon game, to the number of athletes that ended up in the hospital, these Olympics may be remembered as the worst in history, the results of which you can find in totality on the Olympics official website. While we may have believed that the 2020 Olympics being pushed was a horrible disaster, it has absolutely nothing on the garbage pile that was 1904.